6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust. 3 million were from Poland, where my parents were from. Only 10% of Polish Jews survived. Creatively, my mother somehow escaped her village before the Nazis came back to murder her mom and 3 sisters. She was the only survivor from her family. My dad was a brave partisan fighter in the Polish underground, hiding in the woods, sabotaging. He was the commander, and all these things I learned later in life.
The very start of this book about your childhood, what I thought was so magical is that you understood their experience despite the way that it played out in your childhood didn't always have the best impact.
I navigated life through strength and resilience and power. My mind will solve every problem, and there were always a problem to seek.
When I heard about my guest tonight and the book that he authored called The Confessions of a Problem Seeker, I immediately knew what this book was about.
The rest of my life was motivated simply by fear. It took so much discomfort in life that motivated me to keep looking, to keep seeking, pulling on these threads to better understand my history, who I am, and how to find some stillness, some peace.
My guest tonight is an entrepreneur and author. I welcome Howard Steinberg.
It's never too late to let your heart lead.
This is the Meaning We Make podcast.
Tonight's really personal for me in many ways. One is because the topic that we're talking about is one that I deal so much with so many of my higher achieving clients, my founders, the people that are executives, CEOs, and their partners, where life has unfolded very lovely for them, and they've worked very hard for it. They've been very ambitious and been very focused on achieving the milestones that we're taught that we should have in life. Great careers, wonderful marriages, the picket fences, and the kids. And yet something still feels a little missing for them. And they hit a certain point in life. Oftentimes it plays out in burnout. Oftentimes it plays out in divorce or really difficult experiences that they go through with their children, not understanding what is happening to themselves, to their relationships, to their work even. And we start talking about unpacking and unfolding some of the layers that they don't know exist beneath their conscious. It's in their subconscious. And that's where we start talking about what we clinicians call complex PTSD. So when I heard about my guest tonight and the book that he authored called The Confessions of a Problem Seeker, I immediately knew what this book was about because it resonates with so many of my clients and what life is like for them, where on paper, everything looks great, but there's this little piece of them that didn't quite get seen or known, and somewhere along the line growing up that still feels a little hidden and untouched. And it keeps them questioning and circling and sometimes unfolds, like I said, in ways that they could not have expected. So again, my guest tonight is an entrepreneur and author of the book Confessions of a Problem Seeker. I welcome Howard Steinberg.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to be here, Jen.
The very start of this book, you start talking about your childhood. You describe your mom, and I know their history as Holocaust survivors. And what I thought was so magical is that you understood their experience despite the way that it played out in your childhood didn't always have the best impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So can you describe a little bit about what your mom was like, what your dad was like, and how that impacted you growing up?
Well, transgenerational trauma is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly had no awareness of this at all as a child or even as a young adult. I cognitively understood my journey, my history, but not the impact of the parenting. Yeah, my parents, statistically, 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust. 3 million were from Poland, where my parents were from. Only 10% of Polish Jews survived. Creatively, my mother somehow escaped her village before the Nazis came back to murder her mom and 3 sisters. And she was the only survivor from her family that got to Siberia, where she worked in these work camps and got through the war. My dad was a brave partisan fighter in the Polish underground, hiding in the woods, sabotaging. He was the commander. And all these things I learned later in life. It's now that I could look back and say, I used to feel that I succeeded in spite of them because I saw them as just these old immigrants with backward ways that couldn't understand me. And so I distanced myself from that. I didn't realize then that I was also preserving myself, any pain, and feeling their history. I distanced for a long time until later in life that I started to better understand that. My mom was there to protect me, not to nurture, but to protect. So, and from the youngest age, I felt a need to ease her pain. There's an anecdote in the book about, I was very young, like 5 or 6, and was going someplace with my brother and father in the car. And as soon as we pulled away from the house, I said, I can't go, I can't leave mom alone. And I ran home to be by her side. And as I look back and think about that, what was going on? Where did I get that? How was I imbued with that responsibility at such a young age? So at around age 10, I was showing these symptoms of excessive thirst and peeing a lot and losing weight, and finally went to the doctor and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, called it juvenile diabetes back then. Less common than it is today. And my parents were not prepared to process that because they shut down. They didn't want to feel any pain. They got through so much, and now this new threat to their younger son. So what did they do? My mom came home to tell me we have to go to the hospital, and she didn't tell me why. She said, I think it's got to run more tests. She couldn't bring herself to tell me what was going on.
Sure.
They were probably so overwhelmed. And that first night in the hospital, when they're pumping me up with insulin, I had a hypoglycemic event, a low blood sugar in the middle of the night. And I didn't know what these sensations were because I had no experience with it. And I was too shy to press the call button. So I just gritted it out, shaking, shivering, not sure what these sensations were. And somehow it abated by morning. And the scrum of nurses and doctors warned me, you got to tell us. And I still didn't know why. But my point being that night was an additional trauma that affected my sleep patterns the rest of my life, because embedded in that event was this subconscious, unconscious fear that if I sleep, I could die. So that's an example, but I never received, there was no place to land with this condition where I felt supported. And it was just, my mom just redoubled her efforts to control and protect. And, you know, while I didn't want to let them down, I was so repelled by it as well. And that became my Holocaust to survive.
Yeah.
So, you know, they modeled this behavior of resilience and toughness, and always moving forward. And that's what I did. I self-parented through that. But the rest of my life was motivated simply by fear.
Right. And shame was buried beneath the fear, right?
Yeah.
Right. When you have your parents, and in many ways, oftentimes from the book, it was talking about how your mom was like, we don't have to let anybody know. I think you would say it in Yiddish or something, right?
Yeah, they sat me down. They never sat me down for talks. On the eve of going to middle school, right in the summer when I was diagnosed, new school with new friends, and at that time, I just didn't want to feel different. And then they gave me an out. They said, you know, you don't have to tell anyone about this diabetes business. Oh, I said, okay, my inclination was to hide anyway, so now you gave me permission to do that, and that's what I did. It was my secret. It took on such a perverse scale if someone discovered it.
Right.
That the shame of it, I can't even relate to it now.
Right.
But I kept it a secret well into adulthood. well into adulthood.
So for different reasons, I relate to that because I grew up very humbly, very poor. And I somehow ended up in Hollywood, Los Angeles, working for a big company as an executive. And I always carried this shame, what we would call social class shame, because all these other people appeared, whether it was true or not, appeared to have had, Ivy League educations or
Yeah.
very, great parenting. And not that my parents weren't great, but for different reasons, but for similar experiences around what we call complex PTSD. There's shame that's involved, then you carry that, and you take with that different types of beliefs that come up, self-doubt and self-constructs, right? So tell us a little bit about the self-constructs that you created from having parents who meant well or were well intended and did the best that they could in trying to protect you, but that created behaviors, this fear. How did that play out?
Well, I just wanted to control and optionality and keep my world small and safe. This wasn't conscious behavior. I kept trying to navigate life as any young man might. But one perfect example of it is the first kind woman that crossed my path when I went off to college. I grabbed. Eventually, we married.
So let's talk about that. Take me back, because you ended up going to NYU, right? So take me there.
So ultimately, I transferred to NYU, but I didn't have the grades to get in from high school, so I went upstate to a state college in New York, and was friends with my wife, my eventual wife, in the dormitory, and we were just friends. And I remember it became romantic through a turn of events, and I locked on, and I kept trying to determine, is this love? Is this love? Like looking at her, I said, I don't know, but she's a good person. She's a kind person, and she's a supportive person, and I can love her.
And she wanted you.
Yeah, I would. You know what? We kidded about that. Years later, when we separated, I said I was an insecure kid and a good salesman.
Yeah.
And I convinced you to come along for the ride. And
Right.
she said, yeah. And together we built a healthy, productive, codependent partnership.
There you go. Because one of the things that you said really well in the book that I thought was fantastic to be able to identify that a lot of people can't quite figure out is that if you're not used to experiencing that nurturing kind of love, in your case from a woman, because if your mom was, protective and critical, when you're confronted with someone who's showing you such tenderness and love, what was that like?
It felt safe.
Yeah.
It felt safe. What I wanted was, I learned love from my mother. So I did want the duty, the care that she provided, but I didn't want the smothering and the intrusiveness and the controlling. And that was how our wounds matched. Because for Tracy, it was also, her heart didn't want to feel so seen either, or in particular. So we bonded in that way. She could be separate but together, and I could feel her presence without feeling the weight that I was accustomed to. So there's no sense fooling ourselves and trying to look at every experience idealistically, romantically. It's just truth. We had a beautiful love that produced 3 beautiful children. I have no regrets. But back to your original question, it was just fear and safety. It was just survival. And I was aware of it. I was cognitively aware of it, but I had no felt sense for it. I said, okay, well, let's go on in life. Let's go on together.
So you were aware of that you wanted safety, but you had no felt sense of safety. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because most people that I work with, until we get to kind of where you are, they don't know necessarily, what do you mean felt sense? How do you describe that?
I didn't have it then, and it took the ability to drop out of the mind and feel something in your body, in your heart. It takes practice. It takes work. I navigated life through strength and resilience and power. My mind, my analytical mind will solve every problem. And there were always a problem to seek, because the more problems, the more I focused on problems, the less I could feel.
Yeah.
So that's the game, right? And it took so much discomfort in life that motivated me to keep looking, to keep seeking, to keep finding, pulling on these threads to better understand my history, who I am, and how to find some stillness, some peace.
And so we've brought your mom into the equation, and we've talked a little bit about your dad, but what would you say was your relationship like with your father growing up? And because of that, what was the impact to how you became into adulthood?
Hmm. I wanted him to be proud of me. But, keep in mind, again, these are people processing trauma, unconsciously. So he was tough. And I wanted him to see me. And when there were glimpses of him noticing me and making a comment, it was so fulfilling to get just some recognition, because I was the poorer performing son. I had clearly ADHD, which they didn't diagnose back then. Hard to focus, unmotivated.
Chatty, I think you said in the book.
Yeah, I would, but I found a lane with
Yeah.
humor. Like, I'd entertain everyone. I'd be the clown.
Yeah.
And I got attention that way. And my father also, he had a sense of humor. And so, in Yiddish, we use the term kibitz. He was always kibitzing, joking around. And I love that. I love that about him. And I carry that. Unfortunately, he died young. I was 18, and I never really got to know him. God, I wish he was around now after I've done this work, where I could truly appreciate his quiet strength. But throughout adulthood, I felt his presence. I felt that whisper, which motivated me to always keep moving on, always keep moving on. And while perhaps it stunted some development because I stayed in my stories. I learned my stories at a young age.
My stories being, because
like-
a lot of people don't know what that means.
Yeah, well, I think we all, to one extent or another, particularly those of us that have had challenges in childhood, we create a narrative, and mine was about survival and strength, and that this diabetes was not going to stop me, and all I wanted was family and safety and the white picket fence. And I created that narrative. And without really understanding the depths of my history and how I relate to the world and to others. But the stories are just that. They're not real.
They're the meaning you make from the experiences that you have in your childhood that get held in our hearts, in our bodies, and in our minds, right?
Yeah.
And collectively, they become the way what we would call worldview, and handle the world because of the way the world has handled us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I was kind of a defensive person. Like, anyone that discounted me, diminished me, didn't give me a chance, I'd be challenged, and I would challenge them. So yeah, no one was going to get over on me.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a positive manifestation, to be, to get resentful and to have a strong fight response to that kind of stimuli.
That suggests to me life felt very unsafe.
Yeah, that's the theme. That's the theme. Fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
I clung to my wife, I clung to my kids, and I clung to my businesses.
Yeah.
And that was my three-ring circus. And
That proved what? you told us that you met Tracy at, and you transferred to NYU. And we know that your father ultimately passed when you were 18. But start taking us on the trip to achievement, to the things that I'm clinging to prove that I'm safe.
Yeah, it was so basic. Like, I got my undergrad degree, and I said, let me grab an MBA because I'll get a better job. I was not interested in any of the subject matter, really. I was there to get a job. This is, the 80s, and everyone wanted to grab the brass ring. But finance was boring, and I wasn't going to go to Wall Street. Marketing was interesting. It came naturally. So that was what I pursued. And again, it was just get a job, stay safe, get a job. And then there were these realizations, right, that kept, maybe I'm not so dumb after all, that, like, as my growing up, my poor grades revealed, maybe I'm more motivated than I realized. And so every step of the way, I interviewed well, I got good job offers. And then I was working at Pepsi in my second job out of college, out of business school, doing well, and recognized as an innovative thinking marketer. And so I was 27 or 28, I hung out a shingle and opened my own agency. And
in Manhattan?
It was actually in the suburbs.
Okay. Okay.
Building a business, hustling, grinding, and building, maybe I do have talent. Maybe I am capable. And, I never would think of myself as a workaholic. But again, that foundational motivation of survival, there's a chapter called Accidental Success, because, all of a sudden, I'm successful in societal terms, financially, valuable business that eventually sold. But none of that quieted the angst.
And what was the angst? Like, what was it? Was it telling you something?
The whispers got louder, but what was obvious to me was I didn't feel normal. I'd feel alone in a crowd, just like I did as the young diabetic boy. I'd get bored easily, impatient, always looking to the next thing. I found it hard to feel, and I noticed myself not being comfortable, not sitting still, always. So I started seeking. I tried to learn more about it. Talk therapy, some retreats, plenty of prescribed medications, but nothing really worked.
What I see with so many of my clients where, again, they've achieved a lot in life, they have good marriages, right? Ups and downs in them, but good marriages. Their kids are doing well or well enough. But there was still this, what I'm hearing, a quiet noise, this angst, this loneliness, even if I was surrounded by people. You had 3 kids, so even in that, you didn't find enough.
Yeah, there was, the best years that where the anxiety was quieter was, when the kids were young and we were filled with optimism. I was working hard. And I only realize now that while I didn't stay in the office late or go on a lot of business trips, I was always home and I was present to the kids. But when I wasn't, I was in front of the computer screen always. And and I realize it now, even when I don't, I walked away from the business life, I still need to be in a screen comforts me because it's that same anxious nervous system that likes that distraction, that familiar distraction. So for me, I had a rough childhood. I didn't turn to drugs or alcoholism. I didn't try to take my life. I just kept my brain busy.
And that is probably the most of what I see in my practice, is that oftentimes it is this confusion from a lot of people around. But my childhood was ostensibly okay, but they miss those pieces of like the chronic criticism that they experienced,
Yeah.
or maybe the father that traveled a lot but who always came home for the gains, but maybe wasn't always there when some of these, when they maybe really needed him to be there.
Yeah.
Well-intended parenting, but these little moments and enough over time that create these like maybe little cuts,
Yeah.
right? How would
Yeah.
you describe it?
Yeah, well, I too minimized it all. I knew, yeah, I got this diagnosis. Yeah, my parents had their journey. But I moved on. I told myself the
Yeah.
story. I told myself, yeah, everyone's got their shit,
Yeah.
and I'm charging forward. But eventually,
Mm-hmm.
what's the motivation to change? People need to at least hit a speed bump, if not hit rock bottom.
Exactly.
And so it was a confluence of things. Like our marriage finally fatigued, and we had to honestly face the concept of divorce. Around the same time, I got played out of my last startup. I lost control of my company that I started. Investors got control, and it was severely, an ugly ending. And my kids grew up and left the nest and didn't need me the way they needed me. And I was trying to start yet another company, and it was almost like I was choking on the process. I couldn't quite do it. I didn't have to do it. I had enough money, and said, "What is this?" And I could choke up about the motivation to finally take a look. And I didn't know where to turn. Like, talking to therapists, it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I said, what do I do with my life? Who am I? A friend suggested meditation. Well, he asked me, what does your intuition tell you? I said, I have no idea. It's so noisy up there. I really have no idea. So I learned TM, Transcendental Meditation, which is an easy entry for me. Just repeat a mantra. And I started to quiet things and started listening. And the voices got a little clearer, a little louder. And the whole third act of the book was this process of discovery. And there were a lot of modalities and teachers and ultimately psychedelic medicine that was very meaningful.
So that's when the dam broke open for you, and you really saw the life that you had been living while provided safety was not providing authenticity for you.
Yeah, that's the word. And it's really about truth. It never felt truthful. It never felt honest. That's why I've always found it hard to plug in to business culture, because so much of it felt like bullshit to me. I couldn't play the game well. Even our suburban lives could feel stilted and false to me. I wanted to be raw and real, and I think it was my heart that was screaming for this, to awaken, and just because all I was doing was hanging on. I was terrified of being alone. I was never alone. I left home to go to college. I met my wife. We moved in together before I was 18. We moved into to a bungalow and a summer job together, and pretty much stayed together ever since. I was never alone. It was terrifying for me to be alone, because to me alone felt very unsafe. Something could happen to me. And maybe I should explain that a little bit, because with diabetes, you can have low blood sugar, and yeah, there's remedies for that, but it's not what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's not that I can rationalize, no, you can be okay, you're carrying glucose tablets, whatever. Now you have devices and alarms and everything. You're safe, Howard. It doesn't matter. It's in my nervous system.
Yeah. It's the what
in there.
if.
And yeah. And the work I'm doing now is more somatic work. Getting into what's felt in the body is incredible. I think it's the next horizon for me and others. So, yeah, I just couldn't hold it anymore.
Yeah.
And I went in search of me. And now it's a very nonlinear path,
Yeah.
but it now makes sense. But I was bumping around but found some help.
So I want to get to the psychedelics, but before I do, you just said something that is so important for a lot of men like you, a lot of people, but a lot of men that come into my office. They so want the roadmap to healing. They want the roadmap to what do I do?
Yeah,
And I struggle because I say, you're doing it.
yeah,
Be right here with me.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Right here, when you feel uncomfortable, sit in that with me.
yeah,
And they say, but tell me what I'm supposed to
yeah.
do. And so it was so important to me and so valuable to me to have other people hear you, particularly men like yourself who've been successful entrepreneurs, had everything, and to hear you say it's not linear.
It's so true. And I have to even remind myself now, and I get so much relief when I can really feel into the emotion that it's not only nonlinear, it's not necessarily forward, it's back too.
Mhm.
Um, because I can get sad and frustrated that, you know what, I've been working so hard, and where am I? Where am I? I'm still, as Ram Dass says, I have every issue I always had, every phobia, every neuroses, every obsession, I'm just friends with them now. I can look at it and understand these parts in me, the protector, the controller, and they can loosen, so the real authentic me can rise. But it come down to, once you get this level of awareness, then it's self-love. Then it's, patience with self, kindness with self. It sounds so cliche, but it's also so true. And I say, that's okay, Howard. I'm always conflicted with, I need to get out of my comfort zone. I need to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to go attend an event here or there, but then I don't want to. I feel more comfortable just being home with the dog.
Sure.
But I give myself that.
Yeah.
I said, Howard, you're not going to change overnight. Try things here and there, but accept your circumstance, accept who you are in your core, and when you soften that, then the change actually does take place.
So a lot of clients that I work with are very successful, have, all the mile markers that you had and enjoyed. And yet there's oftentimes this little piece of them that's a little off. But they're also unsure of, will it work for them to seek support through psychedelics? And I'm never one to say what's right for someone, but when they're hearing about it in the culture, um, they talk about the fear that they have. They talk about the fear around, I have a lot to lose. What do you say to that?
Depends where they're coming from, but clearly you have so much to gain. you know, whether whatever modality, whether it's breath work, yoga, religion, or psychedelics, there's information in there. There's truth in that, and I've always sought truth. And in the fear is truth. Why avoid? Why detach from truth? It doesn't get you anywhere. It leaves you just more alone and more detached. We build up in ourselves this attachment to our lifestyle, to our careers, to the stories. And I was the same. If someone heard the way I'm talking now, um, someone that knew me 15, 20 years ago, they would laugh. Um, like, I was the guy laughing at Hare Krishnas in Washington Square. Now I come up to them and ask them questions. They're the enlightened ones. They're spiritually awake. There's a difference between, you know, outward confidence and ego-oriented belief in oneself versus a felt sense that I'm good. I'm good enough. I had moments recently where it was just simple simple glimpses of awareness that, huh, I like me. I actually, it sounds so simple, but when you really feel it, it it's so it's such sustenance to navigate life. And then that gave me a clue. Boy, how much energy must I be applying to negative feelings about myself that are historic, that are embodied, that are in my nervous system, that I wasn't good enough, I didn't measure up, or that I'm damaged from my disease, or I could have been a better husband, a better father. I was as good as I could be, no regrets. We make decisions with the information we have. We don't know the past. We don't know the future in the past, and and that's what I would tell them. I said, stop monkeying around, get off the hamster wheel. It's safe. It's safe, and it's warm. It's actually a better place to be.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you describe is externalization to prove I'm good enough, I'm lovable, I'm worthy, right?
Yes, yes. There was a moment where there was almost recognition for this whole life of seeking external validation finally got so unbearable that the other choice, it was almost binary, of being my authentic self. Because up until then, the authentic self was so buried and disconnected and and risky. Because if I be my authentic self, I wouldn't be successful. I wouldn't have more shiny objects. I wouldn't be as attractive. Bullshit. Bullshit. When I let that go and said, I don't give a shit anymore. It's good medicine.
I love the idea that it's medicine to not give a shit anymore. But in fact, it kind of goes back to the point around when people are kind of afraid when they have it all. They might be afraid to try something different, either to do deeper work where it's like breath work or other types of therapy, or psychedelics, because either they're afraid of what they're going to find out. That's scary.
And that's honest. At least that's honest. But when it's just nah, that that's just fear. I understand it, but I think people can get through that.
Yeah, when they're afraid of what they're going to lose, it comes back to your point that you made a few minutes ago about I've attached my sense of self to all these things the way people see me, right? If they're doing it with like people who are trained clinically to administer it, right? And if they qualify, psychedelics are a beautiful gift to finding your way home, to your true sense of self, unrelated to all the achievements or perceptions of others about who you are. It becomes about who you are.
Your essence.
Your essence.
Your
Yeah.
energy, your
Yeah.
your core. You've been in ceremony before, and these medicines, it could be hard work. It can be challenging. People don't like to talk about that. And then after, often, usually, and you're with other people in a ceremony circumstance, and everyone's just so filled with love and connectivity, because what's opening, and this is the duality of all this work, is that when you're working with the heart, you're opening to something bigger than yourself, the universe, others. There's something bigger there. And I think that's the beautiful gift of religion, of organized religion, that it's bigger, it's community. And touching that awareness is medicine in itself. So, really, what's to be afraid of? baby steps, I guess, for some.
Mhm.
I understand it. I'm completely sympathetic to it,
Mhm.
but I've got kind of more of a tough love mentality
Mhm.
because I had to be that way with myself.
Mhm.
I didn't tolerate excuses,
Mhm.
detachment, avoidance. Communication is how we process conflict,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Not avoiding it.
But it takes a lot of courage to confront your fear and
Yeah.
however you choose to do it, because there's a lot of noise out there that will allow you to distract yourself.
Yeah, and it's layered, right?
Mhm.
Right? Like we
Mhm.
have layers, and I have still, a lot more work to do, this forever unfolding, but the dots are connecting and the layers are peeling back, and I'm getting deeper into that authentic self,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
not going back.
No, you can't go back, by the way.
No,
Once you
you
get
can't
here,
unring
for
the
anyone
bell.
who's watching, there's no going back once you get here.
Yeah.
Something that's coming up for me, a couple of things. One is, we talk about like when you're under the medicine with, appropriate facilitators, and especially if you're with others, like group settings or a married couple, right? It changes your connection in such a more deepening way. Would you
Mm.
agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Um, a lot of my very good friends are people I've met in ceremony because you connect
Mhm.
with your hearts.
Mhm.
And there's a shared language, if you will, around what's important,
Mhm.
um, and feeling, again, leading with heart, not mind. And I understand that this language, it's hard to find language for this stuff. And I'm conscious as I sit here talking with you that this can all sound so woo-woo and particular. But again, I don't care.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
it works.
Mhm.
And, writing the book and still standing in this ground with the book was really, my ultimate expression of self-acceptance
Mm.
because I let it all hang out.
Mhm.
And I promised myself when I was writing it that I'll be completely honest because how else could I tell my story? How
Mm.
else can I tell my story? And there's some people that may not like it, and I'm sad about that. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, I believe the long-term good of telling my story honestly and giving people permission, as so it's happened, particularly with men, to be vulnerable.
Mm.
I've heard from friends, um, men I've known a long time, classic, successful businessmen that started sharing about their dads or
Mhm.
how they coped. And that delights me. That
Mm.
absolutely delights me. I think if I could serve,
Mm.
that's how I'll serve.
That is so powerful for me, as given that I'm a psychotherapist and frankly just a woman in the world, right? Like, there's a difference between being a man who's masculine and in touch with his vulnerable parts, and then knows when it's safe to embrace it and when it's time to be the protector,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
Right?
what true masculinity is.
Right.
And vulnerability is
Mhm.
masculine.
Right.
And it's courageous.
Mhm.
I was never comfortable with the play it close to the
Mm.
vest, don't express your feelings. And that's sort of like our American business mentality, right?
Mhm.
Culture.
Mhm.
I was always out of place. I
Mm.
wanted humanity in the boardroom,
Mm.
and it got me in trouble.
Oh, how so?
I
Do
was too
tell.
honest. Yeah, and I'd yammer on, and I'd share too much. I had a great board member. Um, he was a very valuable guy, very successful. Pulled me aside, said, "You're too honest. You're too
Ah,
honest. Don't be so honest." And he was right in that circumstance. But I'm glad that's behind me.
yeah.
Having some financial success in business, yeah, gave myself and family opportunities and privilege. But the greatest thing it gave me is the privilege to heal.
Mm.
I don't think I'd be doing this work if I, had to keep working hard, my nose to the grindstone into retirement. It takes money. It takes time. There's other, of course, there's ways to do this, but boy, privilege to heal.
That is so profound. The privilege to heal. Wow.
We all deserve it.
We really, really do.
We all deserve it. No point in coping.
What made you decide to put it down all here? Was it in search of self-acceptance?
It was more, there was a lot to tell. There's a lot happened to me. And I could only get to the third act through the first and second act. I want to help people. I want to say, look, you can awaken, you can live more authentically, but I can't, without sharing what happened to me in the first act as a child, in the second act, how I built a seemingly successful life on a shaky foundation that couldn't hold, and then lead to the story of awakening and finding myself. And it just called. And when you write, like, it wasn't that hard. The editing was the harder part. The writing was easy in a sense that in memoir form, it's sort of chronological. So I just started telling my story, well, all the shit that happened to me, and just, and then, cutting. Maybe I should have cut more, but, and also, I wanted to leave something behind for my daughters, for my kids. I wish I knew my parents better. Certainly wish I knew my dad better. Now, there's a lot of, I'm sure there's some cringeworthy content in there for my daughters, and, I recognize that. But someday I think they'll be happy that they know me. They know what my journey was like.
Like, really know you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The way that you described that you weren't able to really know your father, who passed when you were so young. Yeah, this was like a gift that you're trying to leave behind.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my gift to them.
Yeah. Well, frankly, it's a gift to many, in truth, because that's why I was so excited to have you when I started learning about your story, because I see so many of my clients and the people that I serve where it can be easy to hide beneath the accomplishments. And for you, especially I would say with New Yorkers who are very, very proud, right? And very, very business oriented, to take this leap of faith and to expose yourself openly where you could have just stayed hidden behind your achievements.
Well, but that character was an imposter. I was never comfortable in that suit. Oh, you're a successful entrepreneur. Like, really? Like, it wasn't that hard. But it was a grind. It was extremely hard. But I couldn't accept it as a badge. I did it because I felt I had to. Not out of free will. This is free will.
Identify in different ways it manifested, but in so many ways I identify in that you were born into struggle, right? You took on your parents' struggle, you were born into struggle, and you carried that into your early life as you tried to, find safety. And I too was born into struggle and didn't realize how we carried that with us in our bodies and in the way that we approach the world until you catch a breath.
Yeah.
And you say, wait a minute, life is not meant to be a struggle.
And most of us never do. Most of us go to our grave.
Yeah.
And yeah, we make it work the best we can. And it's sometimes it's sad to realize.
Yeah. And listen, I do need to acknowledge that I have certain privileges that I have been able to. I am Caucasian, right? I'm able to assimilate into situations simply by being Caucasian and somewhat attractive, right? And that provides me opportunities that other people who were born into struggle didn't get. But so I just need to acknowledge that
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? It's not
Yeah,
an even
same.
playing field.
Yeah, yeah, no, appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I I've talked about this with others that I never felt privileged though,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because and maybe the book bears it out that it was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like uh, people look at me and say, "Rich white guy,
Uh-huh.
patriarchy,"
Uh-huh.
and I say, "No, you have no idea.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have chosen this path."
Yeah.
But you know that sometimes, you know, I'm stuck on the scarcity channel,
Yeah.
and it's just one click away is the abundance channel,
Yeah.
and just flip it. I got, what do I got to complain about?
So well said. I think the other thing I would say that about those moments of privilege that we have from being Caucasian and educated, right? It makes it easier to hide from our shame. It makes it easier to avoid doing
Mm,
some of that work
yeah,
because we're not confronted with it.
yeah, yeah. It's easy because we assume that identity, and it's easy just to play that role because it's a lauded role in society. Yeah, no more.
Hmm. Yeah.
No, I'm good.
So there was a part of the book that you wanted to read as we close, and I wanted to give you the opportunity. Do you want to turn to that
Uh,
section?
yeah, I think we talked a lot about it. Decade after decade, I clung to the heroic story. The way through life is toughness, resilience, and perseverance. Regardless of how motivated I was to grow and change, I struggled to break through with my intentional mind, where all the stories live. My mind could not feel the wounds. My mind could not love myself. My mind could only keep analyzing and striving to muscle through. But as I kept marching forward in this healing work, I discovered that in many ways, the answer was not thinking, not working, it was surrendering. I needed the work of the heart, not the mind. I'm still the same complex alchemy. I still have plenty of issues, but I can now separate myself from the story and thus not default to the constant problem-seeking mind state. My heart will guide me home. And whenever I'm facing mortality in the eye, one regret I won't have is having the courage to live an authentic life of loving awareness. It hasn't been easy, and the work isn't done. But now I know it's never too late to let your heart lead. That's my
I want to
story.
say amen. That's what I want to say. Thank you
I-
so much for sharing your truth, and sharing
thank
you.
you. No, thank you. Any forum that can get people, could get some movement
Mhm.
in this direction is a service we both provide.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen. It helps me a lot if you subscribe to our channel here and look out for future episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.